let's just jump on in. So today we're going to be talking through foundational functionality. So we've talked through academics, right? What it looks like to assign a room in this new platform, similar to how you would do it in Astra Schedule. What it looks like to schedule events. That's what we talked about last time, just scheduling events, right? As a power user, as someone who can go in and has the permissions to schedule, we've gone through that as well. Now we're going to be going through some back-end things, some things that more of a power user or a system admin would set up, which would be things like permissions, talking through rooms, and we call them spaces on the event side of the house, things like that. I have my cheat sheet I'm going to put right here so I don't forget, so I make sure we don't miss anything, so that we can go through everything that we need to cover. So as a reminder, you guys are all muted during the product walkthrough. A best choice for you would be to use the Q&A. We'll have my coworker here, Charlie, is going to walk through that Q&A. He'll be able to easily interrupt me if he needs to, or just furiously type in the background. Charlie, I made a joke on the first webinar that I have two keyboards, right? Because I have my laptop and my regular keyboard, that I was gonna have to be like this. And I literally was like, I wish I could literally type like this, because the questions came in so fast, which is great. Keep those questions coming. So we're going to talk through the migration highlights, just like we do in every one of these webinars, just in case this is your first one, of the what, why, and when. And then we're going to go through product training. So I put academics on here first. We're actually going to go through event permissions and spaces, resources, and groups first, and then jump over to the academic side of the house. If there's any additional Q&A, if we have time, we'll answer questions then, but questions should be answered throughout. And then we'll talk through next steps, like our next webinars, things like that. Okay. So today you have myself, Maggie Roberts, Client Services Advisor. I've been at Astra for a little over 7 years. And then we also have Charlie Strubble, the Director of Product Experience, who I always think started like 2 years after me. And I think he started literally maybe a month after me. So we've been in it for the long haul together. And he's also been very helpful with the events product and very involved in that. So he'll be able to answer a lot of questions for you today. So feel free to drop as many of those in the Q&A as needed. So just as a reminder, what are you getting when you migrate, right? So Astra Schedule is migrating to Essential Scheduling. If you already have our new platform analytics tools with the historical demand and student demand forecasting, anything like that, maybe registration monitoring, you've already seen what that new platform looks like. And obviously, if you've been to our webinars, you've seen it. But we're pulling that Astra Schedule functionality in as Essential Scheduling. And so you're going to be able to improve your course and section and event scheduling to make sure to build a powerful schedule for your students to help students graduate faster, but also to easily conflict check and things like that for event scheduling as well. Okay. So some things that are absolutely highlighted: academics, efficient academic scheduling, conflict-free scheduling, centralized calendaring, and event and resource revenue. So essential scheduling, what's included? These are the biggest things, right? We've talked through academic scheduling and faculty assignment already. That was our first webinar. Our second webinar, we talked about event scheduling. A big piece of that is going to be event workflow. That's our next webinar in the series, actually. And then, of course, all of that wraps around room scheduling. I used to always say, I still always say, Astra Schedule at its core is a room scheduling tool. That's true. Essential scheduling is not just a room scheduling tool. It's much bigger than that, which is why we're so excited about it here at Astra, because it really takes the Astra Schedule functionality to the next level. But today we're going to be, breaking it down, like I said, to those foundations. But why should you migrate, right? The newer architecture is a huge thing. It's something that's more stable. It's scalable. It's a true SaaS product, which means something to a lot of software people, but maybe not to a bunch of higher ed people, and that's okay. I'm one of you. I came from higher ed, but it's a strong thing that most software companies are moving to. The rapid releases are huge. No more upgrades. No more getting a test site to get an upgrade to be able to test before you have to have an upgrade. Now you just get new functionality as it comes out, and it comes out quickly. We're going to talk about even today some development that we're working on currently around permissions that our team is working on now, and it's not like you have to wait 6 months to get it. It's when it's going to be available, it's going to be available. We're going to talk through, or There's also better integrations through our API. Our functionality is very strong, and then we have really great documentation on that. Just the user experience as a whole is more intuitive. And the big thing is no longer having to work out of two softwares. If you have both the analytics and the room scheduling tool, now they're going to come together in one product. And then, of course, when should you migrate? So this is very important, a conversation you should be having with your client success lead if you haven't already. If you haven't because you know you're on the latter end of the migrations and you just know that, that's great. So for example, if you're optimizing, if you're using final exam scheduling, those are things that are going to be available in 2025. So we wouldn't want to migrate you yet, right? Where our goal is to probably migrate or do first optimization in new platform for maybe the spring 26 cycle. That's a goal of ours. Possibly fall 25 if you guys are late optimizers. My institution was a late optimizer. That's okay. And then so final exam scheduling happening at the end of 2025 as well. You could see what we already have, of course, is kind of the basics of Astra Schedule, being able to schedule a room, build an event, have an event request form, have academic scheduling reports. We're building our event reports out as well. So things like that are what you want to look at. And what you want to think about when it comes to migrating, of when you should migrate, is can I do what I'm doing now in new platform? Not necessarily can I do all the things that I wish Astra Schedule did in new platform right now. We get a lot of questions of, oh, is it going to do this and this and this and this new cool shiny thing? A lot of times the answer is yes. We have a lot of cool new shiny things. We want to make sure that you're still able to do what you're doing now in Astra Schedule. So that's a big piece, and that's what your client success lead is going to ask you too, is what's going to hold you back from migrating. As a reminder, we don't have a sunset date for Astra Schedule now. We're not forcing you to move at this current moment. We want you to want to move, and we have clients who are already moving, and we have a migration project that's going to wrap up very soon, within probably the next week or two. Okay, and then depending on what your student information system is, we've thrown this up a couple times. This is actually pulled from our knowledge base, so we have this information within our support center for you to be able to see information on when you should move. Okay. So what is migrating? So we are going to be migrating your data. Of course, your section data is going to migrate because we're going to have to still integrate with your student information system, right? There is going to be a new integration method no matter what student information system you're on. We're using Ethos for our banner and our colleague clients, PeopleSoft and the others, Jinzabar, things like that. They're going to be using not necessarily. This is more technical than I can get, but I know it will require a little bit of work on your technical team. So something to make sure to keep in mind, because we know that they have lots of projects that they're working on all the time. But a couple things that we are migrating is room data and current and future events. Okay, so if you have a bunch of data for your rooms already set up in Astra Schedule, we're migrating that from Astra Schedule into Essential Scheduling for you, because we know the SIS doesn't necessarily hold a bunch of that data. Astra Schedule does, and it does it well. And so we are doing the same thing, and we're talking a lot about that today. We're also sending in or migrating over current and future events. So we're going to do 1 year past and everything current and future for events. That's going to be your dates, times, rooms, things like that, pulling over into that essential scheduling platform, as well as the contact for the event. Customers is very different. We're going to talk about groups today. So that's not something that's necessarily coming over, but that's because it's a totally different construct. And I think you guys are going to like it because, let's be real, customers and contacts can be kind of finicky and also kind of a pain in Astra Schedule. And so we have taken that into consideration, and we've made that a much easier process. Okay. We get to talk about a lot of this today instead of just talking about it in theory like we have in the last two webinars. So without further ado, let's jump into the product, right? So we're going to talk through permissions and spaces in both places, as well as some of those groups and things like that. Before I move on, I know there's some chats and some questions. Anything I need to answer for the group right now, Charlie?
Nope, you're good to keep going.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to switch which screen I'm sharing. Can you confirm for me that you're now seeing our events product?
Yeah, we got it.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, you're going to see the side of my face, and I'm using this screen now, but let's jump in. So as we've walked through before, this is where you can do your event scheduling on our events product. We can see all these nice different colors from our event categories. Reference the previous webinar for all of that good information. But first, we're going to talk through users and permissions. So I'm going to come down here to where my name is. This is me logged in as the user. On our academic side, you can see the same thing. If I go to profile, I can see the email address that I'm logged in with. But if I click on this and then click on organization settings, this is where it takes me to my users. And this is this is one of the things that's changing a lot from AstroSchedule into Essential Scheduling is how permissions work. Because you can see the roles here. And if I show you change role, you'll see that we have 3 roles. Some of you are like, we have 50 roles, because you guys have a lot of different things that you need people to do. And we can still handle that. It's just not necessarily in this other place, building these roles, making sure they work, and then go testing it. Instead, you're going to be able to actually say, hey, this thing, I need this person to be able to do this thing with it. So we have 3 levels here. We have administrator, manager, and participant. Administrators can do everything. So be very specific with who your admins are. Obviously, you're going to see in our demo site that everybody's an admin. I'm expecting to see 1 to 3 admins in your event site because they can do absolutely everything, approvals, things like that, be able to edit space information, edit all sorts of things. Your admins are your true power user admins. You also have managers and participants, and these are really levels that you can decide what those look like because you can give some bulk permissions to managers as well as participants, but then you can also get into some specifics, and I'll show you that as well. So these are our 3 roles, not 50 roles. It's a big deal and a big change. Okay. Now with those role permissions, where you then go from there is showing them what can they do with those permissions based off of the space or the resource. One thing we're going to talk about next week is requesting as well. This is where you actually set your request approvals. This is where our default approvers are. We're going to talk more about that in our next webinar next month, the day after my birthday. So we're going to talk about all of that. But if I come in here to spaces, this is where we can get more into permissions around those. And I'm going to also talk about groups as well, because groups can be used. And actually, I put groups next on my little cheat sheet. So we're going to go through groups first. So groups are similar to customers and also similar to roles of what you would think of in AstroSchedule. It's kind of a combination where if you ever thought, man, I wish I could just give permissions to a whole customer group, you kind of can now with the groups here. So for example, if I click into marketing department, I can see that we have a manager of the marketing department, but that's someone in the marketing department. And we also have a member of the marketing department. Now, this group I can now give permissions to for a space or a resource, which I'll show you. So groups are very strong in that they can be used in different places. So a couple things around that. You have a name for a group. You can give it an image. This is our actual default image, but you can add in an attachment and give it, make it like a featured image for the group. So we could see here, like, here's the primary scheduler's image. If you wanted to put in individual student organizations, you can put in their logo. If there were fraternities or sororities, you could put in their Greek letters here if you wanted to, because you could go in and give them permissions if you'd like. We do have this join by access code option where when you go to log into the event site, you can give someone an access code and they will join that group. I think you guys will be using SSO a little bit more than that, of your automatic sign in, where things or people can automatically be put into some of these groups, like a group of faculty staff or a group of student, to give them bigger permissions, which you're probably already doing now. For example, the institution that I worked at before I worked at Ad Astra, we had users when they logged in. We used LDAP then, of course, but when they logged in, they either went to the faculty staff role or the student role. Now they can go into the faculty staff group or the student group, but that can still give them their permissions and actually can do a little more when it comes to requesting, which we'll talk about in our next webinar too. One thing I've also had clients ask before is, can we upload a bunch of people, a bunch of different contacts into these groups. And we do actually have a bulk import where you can update, add people to groups. You basically just download a CSV template, fill it out how you want to, and then re-upload that template to bulk assign people into these groups as well. If you aren't using SSO, or if you want to put them into individual student organizations to give them different permissions, that would be a way to maybe take permissions away from a student organization. Maybe they are not following protocols their way they're supposed to, things like that. Okay. So that's our groups here. And like I said, groups are similar to customers as well as similar to roles, because you can assign a group as a contact to an event, which is what we saw last week, or not last week, last month on the event webinar. But you can also assign them to permissions. Okay, so now I'm going to jump over to spaces, and we're going to talk through different space information plenty. We're going to talk through, like the different types of information you can add to a room or a building or a campus. But before we jump into any of those things, I'll show you first that we have, this is the city, campus, building, room. So you can see that we have this hierarchy automatically built in here. But if I click into a room, before I click into anything else, I'm going to click on these three dots up in the top right corner and click edit permissions to kind of bring this full circle. And here are those roles, and here are some groups and some individuals, right? So this is where I can create role-based permissions. So for example, admins always have full access, but managers, I can take away access, or I can give access. And the options that you have, or you can give them none, you can revoke all permissions, you can give them view permissions, request permissions, approve, and then edit. And you could see that those kind of go in the hierarchy. Similar to how in Astra Schedule, if you want to give somebody edit permissions, they have to have request permissions. And same with like schedule permissions, they have to have it request permissions. That it's the same kind of thing, except you just have to click one here. You don't have to click a whole bunch of checkboxes in order to make it work. You also don't have to click the little edit pencil and then go pick the things that you want. Instead, you're coming directly to the source, the space or the resource to say, this is who I want to give permissions to and where. Now, this I clicked in an individual room, but I'm going to click out of here and go back to the campus. And of course, you can create permissions at the campus level as well. So if at the Colmar campus, the admins have full access, managers have edit, participants have request. Awesome. Now I can go make exceptions to that rule by going into individual buildings or maybe individual rooms and giving others permissions to this space if I need to. For example, this is where the users and groups come into play. Let's say most of the marketing department is they're just participants. So that means they only have request permissions. Well, actually, I've come in and I've said, well, the marketing department only has view permissions, right? You're making an exception to a larger rule, but that's okay. And then I could even have an individual, Amanda Sellers, who I've given edit permissions. So that's high, and she could be just a participant in her role, but I'm giving her higher permissions at this individual campus level. And then you can go in and you can make exceptions at the building room level underneath that. Because I know a lot of you will build things at the campus level, especially if you are a multi-campus institution. You're gonna have different people doing different things on different campuses. Or let's say you only have one campus, but you have building schedulers. This is where you would come in and you would actually just put individuals on the building level. You're not having to go build some role and then apply it to a user. You can actually just go to the campus, go to the actual thing you want to give someone permissions to and give them permissions. Okay. I promise I'm going to get back to the spaces and talk through all of that, but I just want to show you that for our resources, which you can also, of course, assign to events, you can have images for those. You can do whatever you need to track like the details. You can do a quantity. You could say if they're available for booking. We could talk through these things as well, like having images. Request questions is actually something we're going to talk about in our next webinar. But you can see that we have the same permission structure with resources as well, where you can go in and give permissions based off of the different roles, the different users or groups, and based off of the entity that you're actually giving a permission to. Okay, okay, but let me check my cheat sheet. Yep, good. Still doing great on my cheat sheet. So let's jump into an actual space and talk about now. We talked through permissions, how to give people permissions. Let's talk through actual functionality of a room within the events part of the software. Okay. So we have a few things that we could talk about right here at the top. One, available for booking. You can have some rooms in here that are just academic spaces that you want to be able to see what's happening in them on the grid, but you don't necessarily want somebody to be able to go in and schedule it or request it. That's where this available for booking and available for public requests is something you can turn on and off. You also can turn on auto approve. This is something that I've had clients ask me for a lot in Ask for Schedule. And of course, the answer always in Ask for Schedule is if it's going through the event request form, somebody has to touch it, right? Somebody has to approve it. Somebody has to do something with it in order to say whether they can use that space or not. Now you have an auto approve. So you can check that box to allow the auto approval of a space, even if they go through a request form. Okay. You can also edit allowed booking times. So this is where you can come in and say when you want this space to be able to be requested and booked. And I just hit this edit allowed booking times to come in and check the dates, put things in, put the length of time that someone could request. And you could see if unset requesters are not restricted to specific lengths of time. If you don't have anything in here, it's just available all the time to be requested. And if that's how you guys operate on campus, great. But if you guys are operating in certain hours, this is where you can start to put those in rather than always having to go in and, maybe build usage controls in order to build office hours or building hours, which we've had a lot of clients do in Ask for Schedule. Now you can turn on these allowed booking times instead. A couple things that we see here that I can't edit are the room number and the capacity. And that's because these numbers are coming over from the academic side. I'll just go ahead and sneak peek show you. If I come here to admin and settings on the academic side and come into rooms, we could see that we have that kind of information here, right? We have the room number and we have the capacity. And that's because we're pulling information from the student information system as well. And we want to make sure that that room number is always connecting with what's in the SIS. Because if you're going to go assign a classroom to a class, we've got to make sure that it's going to talk back to the SIS just fine. And so the room number is always something that's going to remain stagnant based off of what's on the academic side of the house. This is kind of the truth holder here on the academic side. This is the source of truth for all things rooms, but you can always come in and you could see even if I click into a room, it's going to say edit additional room attributes in the events app. So there's all sorts of things that only events people care about, right? And so we have lots of information that we can hold here in order to help your events requesters, your event schedulers, people like that. Okay. So those are two things that we can update. Now, the capacity is something that you can't edit. One thing that I've requested, because you can see we actually can have different configurations, is that we can edit it for other configurations. So we should be able to see that in the future. You can also go in and add in a address. So if you have specific addresses for your buildings or rooms, you can add those in. And this will actually show through on a public facing calendar for an event. If you have something set up as a public event and the space has an address, it'll give you a Google map to be able to see that. I'm going to talk about tags in just a second, but a couple things that you guys are used to seeing. Features, right? So we have a list of features that we could come in and add. Those features live in the organization settings down here where my name is. That's where you can go in and add those features to your list in order to be able to add those in. And they each actually have a little image associated to them. So I can see here are the features for these rooms. And these are actually things that you can see when you're requesting an event as well. You could see those little images to let someone know, okay, well, this room has a TV, a whiteboard, and a security panel. If your requester needs to know if it has those things. We can also see that we have an image here. You can have an image for each configuration. So you can update a featured image in order to be able to see that when going through the request process. If I come in here to a different configuration, this is our default configuration. If I switch over to standard, we can see here that this highlighted in blue, which means it's different from what we've seen in the other permissions. And so we could see that like we added laptop here. I think it was laptop, maybe whiteboard. One of these was added in as a different feature that we have now for this configuration, right? And this is where I said I think we should be able to update the capacity because a lot of times those change. You also can have different images for each configuration. So let's see if I have one that has a different image. I do. Thank you, Charlie Test. So we could see that this image is different. It's going to highlight in blue for me this tag that this image is different from the default configuration, right? So these different configurations are actually things that someone can easily select within the event request process, which is awesome, right? We saw also in last month that you can just, when you pick a room, you can just pick from the drop down and click configuration. You don't have to click 16 times in order to find a different configuration that you want to use. It's just right there, ready to be seen within the event. That's also information that we want to pull into reports because we know that your people need that information, but also they should just be able to pull the event up on their phone and see, oh, this is the Charlie Test configuration. I know that means that I need 6 round tables and 60 chairs. So very easily accessed information. Okay. Go back to our default configuration here and let's talk about tags. So tags are pretty open, right? We talked about tags, I think, when we talked about events last month, where you can add tags to events, right? You could say it's a way to continue to categorize your events. You have your event category, you can give it a subcategory or some other type of information by adding in a tag. You can do the same thing here with regions. So if you needed to say that this room was ADA compliant or this room was part of a certain region, tags are where we're going to be associating regions. A couple of things that aren't migrating yet, but will migrate. I saw a timeline, hopefully by the beginning of Q3 of this year, is migrating your features and your regions from Astra Schedule over here into our platform, our essential scheduling platform. So where we would see the features that you already have created in Astra Schedule here, and your regions would show up here within the tags. Okay? So if you have a math department region, or if you have an optimization friendly region, that's going to show up here. Obviously, you're not going to need that in the event side, but we're going to be able to see that here on the academic side. I'm kind of spoiling my talking points for later. But that's the type of information that we're going to be pulling over. For now, if you're not using features, you're not using regions, that's totally okay. If you want to start using them later, great. You can update them here easily by adding in those features and using these tags in different region options. We, of course, also have attachments where you can upload attachments to a room if you need to for any reason. And then, like I said, we're going to talk through request questions plenty in our webinar next month because that all goes through the event requesting and the workflow. Okay. So that's a space that we have. One thing that's also different within Essential Scheduling for Master Schedule is you can assign an event to a building or even a campus rather than assigning it at the room level. So let's say you want to just create an event of homecoming. Remember, you can have events and then bookings. You have your event of homecoming. You just want to assign it to the campus because it's everywhere on campus. Homecoming takes over the whole place. Or if you want to put graduation and it takes over your whole Performing Arts Center. That's what we had where our graduation was. Everything for graduation was in that building. There are 6 rooms in that building. Everyone was using for graduation. So we just wanted to apply that building. Obviously, everything in Astra Schedule, you have to apply to an individual room. But now you can apply it to the building level when it comes to an event. So you can do a lot of these same things with a building and assign that directly to an event. Okay. So that, resources. Let me jump in before I go over to the academic side. I, of course, want to talk through resources as well because I only shortly showed this to you and I want to make sure that you see plenty of things. So I'm going to go back into this microphone here. And so you could see that we have a quantity. So we're still going to be tracking whether, let's say, one event is already using a microphone at a time when you're wanting to request an event, it will show you 8 of 9 available. It's going to track those resources for you. This is also where you can say if they're available for booking or not. Remember, admins can schedule everything, but if you have an admin that you want to schedule something, but you don't want anybody else to be able to touch it, that's where you can use that available for booking. Or of course, you can get into your permissions that we have here. That's still here ready for you, right? You can add descriptions. You could add that with the room as well. We also have attachments. So this is where that featured image kind of comes up. So we can see this is the image that we have for the microphone. You can also add tags here. So this is where we would see something like resource groups, resource categories that we have in AstroSchedule of grouping those resources in different ways. This is where we would see the tags come into play to use those. And then of course, request questions, which we're going to talk about next month. So that's everything on our event side that I wanted to make sure to go through today. So we talked through permissions and we talked through spaces, groups, and resources. Charlie, going to pause here. Any questions I can answer out loud for the group?
I don't think so at this time. There are some questions about sorting by room type, for example, when looking to schedule something, but I think you'll probably get into that on the academic side. So we
Yeah.
can kind of, yep.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay. Jumping over here back into the academic side, I'm going to start from our homepage to show our navigation and everything. But we're going to talk through how you can look for different rooms. Or actually, we already talked about looking for different rooms on the academic side in our first webinar. But we're going to talk about actually updating those spaces and then also permissions as well. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is users. And if you're already a schedule building client, this is going to be something that you've seen before, because we have some of these permissions as well. And also our development teams are literally underneath me wizarding, developing stuff around permissions right now. And that's one of the things, like I talked about, we don't have to wait 6 months in order to get those permissions because we have to go through some upgrade to get it. Like when it's ready at the end of this week or whenever it's going to be ready, maybe next week, those permissions jump in and they're ready to go, ready to be displayed. And I'll show you an example of that. So if I come in here to admin and then settings, I'm going to come here to users. And surprise, we have 3 roles again. There's technically a 4th. There's the Astra admin, but you guys can't touch those. Only us Astra folks can touch those. Of course, in this demo site, everybody's set up as an admin, but you have 3 options that you have here. Admin, who again has access to everything. Contributor, that you can give some permissions to. And then user, which is a view only role. Our user type is what we call them here. Okay, so again, admins can see everything. A couple things on the academic side that are important here is that like they can view pathway information and the enrollment information for students if you're a student demand forecasting client as well, or what we previously called predict. That's the type of information that you can see as an admin. The user can view everything. They can't see the pathways or the enrollment, but they can view the historical demand data. They can view the student demand data. They just can't go edit or do things with pathways. They can view reports, all those types of things. They're able to see that information, but they can't touch anything. And then you get contributors. And contributors is where you really get into the nuts and bolts of being able to actually make edits to the schedule. And contributors you can set up to be able to make edits within a term. And you can also restrict them to do different things. So for example, I think I have a contributor down here. If I click on, any of these that are just admin or user, you're just going to see delete or unlock, right? Unlock is if somebody has logged in and they haven't signed back in time in order to get their new email address or their new password. If you're a single sign-on client, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But the contributor gets an extra little piece here called edit privileges. And if I click on that, you can see this is where I can give them the permissions that we have available on the academic side. So this is where you can say, what do I want them to be able to edit, or which departments do I want them to be able to edit in essential scheduling? Now, departments are something that we're pulling from your student information system. We don't have to build those like we had to build in AstroSchedule, where you could then go apply them in a role. We're just pulling those in automatically because that's information that you already have in your SIS. And so we're pulling those in. So we can see those departments are here ready for me to select. And then we also have these 2 permissions. So publishing sections means being able to actually push the write back into the student information system, or the publish of the data from the section back into the student information system. Because we talked about that in our first webinar as well, that once you make an edit, you can publish one off or you can bulk publish those changes back over into the SIS. If you have a bunch of contributors that are going to be going in, making all sorts of edits, but you don't even want them touching the student information system, that's great. Don't check that box. They can't edit, they can't push those, or they can edit, but they can't push those changes back over. So one of our schedule building clients has had their department chairs going in, making all sorts of edits, but their registrar's office is the team that actually goes in and says, yep, these edits look good. I'm going to go in and actually be the one to click the publish button. And it's built into their process now of uh, instead of having to check on a spreadsheet, make sure, okay, I'm okay with these edits. Now I'm going to go hand type them into Banner or hand type them into Colleague or hand type them into PeopleSoft. Now I can just see, okay, here are the edits that they want to make. I feel good about them. I approve them. I'm going to click publish basically to prove them. You can choose who has that publish permissions. Admins, of course, have everything, but contributors you can choose. So if you have a contributor that you really trust, maybe you make the dean's contributors where they can edit their departments and they can actually publish. You could do that. You can really set up that permission, that workflow, however you want to. As a reminder, if you are a migrating client, we're going to teach you how to do what you do in Astra Schedule now. If you want to go into, I want to make all my edits to my sections. I want to be able to build a section from scratch. I want to be able to go make a meeting pattern change, but I need to build through the business process strategy of that and want some hands-on training from Ad Astra on that. That's an extra training that you can add in, an extra implementation that you can add on to your migration, which we already have had clients that are opting into that to build their full schedule, not just make room assignment changes within essential scheduling. And the last checkbox we have here is restrict section editing if configured for term. And so this is where you get into a little bit more bulk permissions around who can do what. Now, if this is unchecked, that means somebody can go in and edit whatever they want to in any term. Okay. That again might be your registrar, your dean, maybe not your dean. They're probably not on the computer a lot. But different things like different people like that who you want to be able to make all the edits because they're responsible for what's in the sys anyway, right? But your department chairs, let's say you want to be able to say, you can make edits up into this point and then you want to turn off them being able to make edits. That's awesome. All you have to do is check this box. Then if I go into my actual term and I come into one of these terms that I'm actually editing, let me go into this spring roll forward here. You can turn on restrict term editing. You can actually give a start date to that. So you don't have to make sure to go in and do it on a certain date. You can check the box and say, okay, 2 weeks from now, restrict term editing. And that means you can't edit anything. And then you can go allow certain things to be edited, right? So you can allow location changes, or that's the one thing that you don't want to allow. You can uncheck that. And then you can say, well, I do want to allow instructor changes after this certain time or meeting time changes, max enrollment changes, whatever fits your process of, I've seen most institutions have kind of like a two-part scheduling system where they have the first big bulk scheduling of everything they need to do. There's a little mini review session where then somebody says, hey, go make these changes or I don't approve these things. And then they have their second session. And then they're like, okay, now it's time for the schedule to go live. And if you need to make any changes now, students are going to be affected. You're going to have to come to me, right? So if that's your process, you can build that in here with the restrict editing. Something that we're going to be building over the next year, I think. The roadmap, I can't remember exactly where it is in my head. Some workflow around this as well. We're being able to say, I need this person to approve this, or I need to send this over here. So some actual approvals coming into play. But right now, you can definitely set up those restrictions to say, this person can't edit here, this person can edit here through this restrict term editing and that contributor permission. Okay. Now, we also will see if I come back over into users, there's something called groups. So the event permissions are all baked out, right? They're good to go. The academic permissions are going to look very similar to where you can go in and say which space someone has access to. And you can do that based off of an individual user or based on a group. So we can see some groups that we have in here now, administrators, faculty, registrars. Like you can come in and create different groups here and add people to those groups, just like on the event side. Like I said, they're actively working on these now. This groups thing wasn't here last week, and now it's here. So that's again that true SaaS product, right? Which means only things to Charlie in the room, but it means should mean a lot to you because it means that you're getting those updates as much as you need for new functionality that's coming out, for new foundational functionality. I came up with the alliteration for most of the webinars, and I apologize that most of them are terrible. So these groups are where you're going to be using them is for permissions. Um, it, and then you'll also be able to do the same thing with departments. So I was told that this is very new. Don't show it yet. Departments are going to be doing something very similar where you can assign permissions at the department level, similar to a group. You know, a group might be more like a faculty, staff, or a student. Obviously, students aren't going to be doing anything in here. But that may be more like deans and department chairs, and maybe you have faculty, staff. The department is more like an actual department of being able to go in and edit those permissions at the department and group level. So we're going to be able to see more of those things. So that's coming, currently being developed right now. Okay. Now let's jump back over into rooms. And let's talk about some things that we see here. So first of all, this is your rooms management page where you can come in, and there are these two columns here. This one means that it's available for academic scheduling, and this one means that it's available for event scheduling. So there are some rooms that you might not even want showing up on the event side of the house. They're never going to have events in them. They're never going to be something that you want even somebody to possibly request. You don't have to turn on this flag. If you do turn on this flag, it's going to show that room on the event side of the house, and someone's going to be able to schedule it, request it, whatever you want them to do with that, unless you change the permissions in on the event side of the house. Okay? So you can choose these toggles here. We then also have the room information. So we have the room number, the room type, and then we also have the source. So all of these that we see in here are going to be, because it's a demo site, are going to be coming from the SIS, right? So we have the room number, the room type. We can see this is, if you're a banner school, you know that you have like a handful of room types that you can use. And then we have source of SIS here. But when you're a migrating client, we also have sources of Astra schedule. I think we just put AS8 in there. And then if you're also a brand new client, you might have something that's like a room file. We're going to do room files for these. So if you were around when you implemented Astra schedule on your campus, you had a room file that you uploaded. We have one here as well. Because there could be some rooms that aren't in your student information system, or data that's not in your student information system that you want uploaded. That's the kind of information that we'll see here. So instead of having room type of C, you would have room type of classroom, or room type of classroom biology or lab biology, whatever you wanted to have here. You can have that show up here within the room type, and we can update that either via Astra schedule data coming in when you're migrating, or a room type if you would be a brand new essential scheduling client. But all of you guys are here because you want to migrate. So obviously it would be through migrating your Astra schedule data. So I'll take a quick pause to say, if you feel like your Astra schedule room data isn't up to date, it probably would be a good idea to maybe take an audit of that before you move over into central scheduling. So we're taking what's in Astra schedule and we're going to push it over into the new platform. We recommend doing an audit of room data about once a year anyway. So if you haven't done that this year, you got some student workers that you need to give them some summer hours. This is a great thing to do, is have them walk the campus, make sure that features are up to date, that the how many chairs are in a room is up to date, so you can make sure that capacity looks good. Course capacity we want to make sure is matching what's in the student information system, things like that. So that quick plug, I would highly recommend that. We of course also see the building, the campus, and the capacity, and the description, which is usually the same thing as the room number. This is like I said, this is pulling from the SIS, and that's so we can connect. Hey, if I go add English 101 to Colmar room 185, when I go to click publish, it's going to know what that room is because we have it in the back end connected with what the student information system room is. No more sys keys, none of that. You can see that in the last 3 webinars, we haven't said the word sys key until now. Sys keys are in the past. Now we're actually just connecting directly with your student information system. So then if I click into a room, here are the details that we can edit on the academic side. So we can see, here's the description, the source. Right now you can't edit the room type, but that is something that's coming in the pipeline to be able to edit here within the academic side of the house. We also see that we have these little tabs here of features and regions. Like I said, those aren't migrating yet, but they're going to be migrating. And this is where you can add which features of rooms and which regions you have within those spaces. So for example, if I come over here, these are the only room features available to me now, but I can go add a laptop to this space. We also have feature categories still. So if you need to go in and create a category of software or maybe a category of facilities, um, or maybe not facilities, just furniture. You could do all sorts of different categories. Things don't have to be in categories if you don't want them to be just like an Astra schedule. And then we also have regions. So you can create as many regions as you want to here. And then those things are things that you can search by. You could search by those features and by those regions in order to be able to assign a space. I know we're getting close to time here, but I will just go ahead. Let me check my cheat sheet. Yep. Um, this is the last thing I want to show, which is perfect. So if I come over into, not schedule, I want to go into courses. So if I want to come in and actually show you, okay, this is kind of a refresher from a couple months ago, but if I come into our section here and I want to make a room assignment change, then I can do that here by editing the meeting. I can click on our little magnifying glass here once it loads for us. And this is where I can easily come in and see, I can filter by features, filter by regions. We don't have any options in here, which is why nothing is showing. And I'm sorted by capacity right now, but I can also sort by room type if I want to. And actually I can filter by that as well. So this kind of room selector we have on the academic side, this kind of room selector is actually coming on the event side as well. And I think we said that in our last webinar. So you can come in here and sort by capacity, sort by room type, sort by seat fill even if you wanted to, in order to make sure that you're getting the right space for your room or for your class. Okay, that's everything from my cheat sheet. I'm have checked all the boxes. Charlie, any questions that I can answer before I jump back over into the PowerPoint?
I don't think so. I think I've gotten to the bottom of the list.
Okay, great. Thank you for furiously typing in the background for us. So I'm
Sure.
going to change which screen I'm sharing. Change back over to this one, hit share. Okay, can you confirm for me that you're seeing the PowerPoint again?
Yep, we got it.
Cool. Okay, so if you do have additional questions, don't worry, I'm going to throw my email address up so you can send those over to me. But I wanted to talk through some upcoming webinars. We, of course, have the one I've been referencing a whole bunch. We have the event workflow webinar coming up on May 28th. We're going to talk through those event request or space request questions, resource request questions, some different things about how we have one event request form rather than 12 event request forms possibly that you have on campus right now. We're going to talk through those, and it's really a good follow-up to this foundational functionality of how you can have users and groups set up and then be able to apply those also when it comes to the event requesting. So you will be able to see that. In June, we'll have Peter going through schedule building. So talking about, in our first webinar, we just mostly talked about changing the room assignment. I think we touched on changing a faculty member for a section. We're going to talk through the whole shebang of being able to edit a section from top to bottom and how you can build your whole schedule within Essential Scheduling. Like I said, this is that add-on of being able to get that implementation, to walk through that, get a business process review. We walk through all of that stuff. But that webinar is in June. And then it's not on here, but in July, we're going to be talking about, for all of our events folks here, we're going to be talking about registrations and invoicing, which is also an add-on that you can add on to your subscription with Essential Scheduling. Okay. As a reminder, we have the space station. If you hate these webinars and you think that Peter and I are terrible at them, go add that to the space station. No, if you think they're great, definitely add that. So feel free to go in and add it. This is where you can connect with your peers. I would recommend going in here and, there's different prompts that our awesome marketing team will put in to ask for feedback. We're asking for feedback all the time within the space station It's also where your peers are going in and asking for feedback, asking for what's the best way for you to do this thing within the software, or not even necessarily in the software. And then, of course, there are great rewards in here too. I know we've had some people who've gotten some really great rewards through the space station. So, highly recommend checking that out if you aren't already a part of it. And then lastly, here's my email address. If you have some other questions that come up while you are thinking about migrating, or you're talking to your client success lead, feel free to shoot me an email. They're constantly keeping me in the loop on your conversations as well. But I'm I've had a few of you reach out to me, which is great. Especially if you don't know who your client success lead is, you can of course submit a support ticket. They'll get you connected. But I'm also happy to get you connected with who you need to talk to about the migration, um, with all sorts of things. I know I'm going to be talking to a few different institutions this week about migrating. And again, some of those institutions are institutions that I'm going to say, hey, you're probably not going to migrate till later in 2025. And you know what? That's okay. You know, we are building things all the time. We think of this as like waves of migrations. And that's a good thing because we can't migrate you all at one time. But we want to make sure to migrate as many as possible that are ready to go. So make sure you're talking to your client success lead if you are interested in that migration. But otherwise, I think we might wrap a few minutes early today. Um, Double check that we are good to go with everything that we need. But please let me know if you guys have additional questions. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for being here today. And we hope to see you in May for our event workflow and requesting webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.